Welcome to Apocalypse Apocrypha. I'm your host, JJ Shoddy, and this is the podcast where I discuss all things post-apocalyptic. Episode 6, and things have already gone off the rails. There I was, minding my business, when a wild professor appeared, and now we have our first discussion. So, today we're going to be joined by a Professor David Perlmutter, and we're going to be nerding out about all things post-apocalyptic. Strap yourselves in, because we're going to go down many rabbit holes, leaping from topic to topic, and it's going to be a wild ride. So, sit back and enjoy. I have with me today David Perlmutter, a professor from Texas Tech, I believe the university is called. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. And we're going to be talking about the post-apocalyptic genre. I am very excited for this conversation. I have not been stressing about this all day. So, David, can you please tell us a bit about yourselves, and then we'll get into the meat of the conversation.
Right. And you said myself plural, so that's actually correct. I am a plural because I have multiple lives, I guess. I grew up really interested in historical word games, miniature figurine games, and edging into role-playing, but mostly historical. I sort of like history. I like the Battle of Stalingrad and World War II and Gallipoli. I mean, I just was always fascinated by history. So that was my entry point into like thinking what was it like to be another person, to live another life. I eventually became a professor of media, and I've been doing that for the last 30 years. And I especially teach courses where I enjoy pointing out to students what I think are really great content, movies, television, games, and books. And then also talking about, especially today, people like you, and that's how I reached out to you, who are, I think, doing a terrific job of a very cold, sober, hard-headed, but empathic analysis of how people create genres and make choices. Because what I tell my old students is that just saying whether you like or not, don't like something, or whether something's good and bad isn't enough. You have to break down with a technical analysis, an emotional analysis, a narrative analysis to really understand, was something successful or not in what the author set out to do, whoever the author is. And the author, of course, could be Disney spending $200 million and 500 people, or it could be one person self-publishing a zombie post-apocalyptic prepper novel. So I just love doing that. I've written books on the rise of social media and mostly warfare. I'm very interested in warfare in the media, but that led me to be interested in my favorite subgenre, which you are talking about, which is post-apocalyptic.
Fantastic. Yeah, I like all of that. I'm a bit of a miniature war gamer myself, but that's cool. Okay, so many questions already. Okay, so the first question for me, I guess, is we know what brought you to the genre, but what would be your definition of a post-apocalyptic story? Just because I find mine is a bit different to everyone else's. So just if we can get that leveled out straight away, that sort of gets us on a good understanding of each other.
Right. And I want to apologize ahead of time because I was born to be a professor. Both my parents were professors. And so I tend to get professory, which is I tend to go off on tangents and I tend to answer questions with questions. So in defining what is an apocalypse as a genre and post-apocalypse, I have to say it's complicated and it depends, which is a very professor answer, right? So, for example, for the people of Rapa Nui, the arrival of the Europeans was the apocalypse. It led to the destruction of their civilization, massive depopulation through disease and murder and enslavement. And so, I mean, if you went to them and said, so, I'd like to tell you about this book I wrote about the apocalypse, that I think the average, survivor of the people of Rapa Nui might say, yeah, I'll tell you all about it. We went through it, right? So that's relative there. Now, for us in modern Western civilization, for a lot of people, World War I was an apocalypse and people survived it. And World War II was like apocalypse redux. And then after that, the apocalypse genre really became, I think, embedded within our society. So to me, it's when a society ends or is so radically changed that it's almost unrecognizable. And so that can happen on a small scale, like a little island in the Pacific, or it can happen on a city scale. It can happen on a country scale. Obviously, a lot of the apocalypses that you look at in fiction and ones we see in fiction tend to be probably on the national scale, inferred on a global scale. Sometimes, like the famous Australian apocalypse novel On the Beach, made into several movies. Probably a classic. I wasn't old enough to remember it, but then when I grew up, it was anybody's top 5 list of apocalyptic nuclear war apocalypse books and certainly movies there then, and with Australia square and center in the storyline. But we got to have some Americans in there to be part of the market. And we can talk about that. Why include Americans? Well, you got to include Americans, right, in the apocalypse. So, but that was, we were told in the book, I mean, the author, the narrator tells us it's a global apocalypse. And in fact, it's still discussed today. I on Reddit, I saw a discussion just recently, like, hey, on the beach, there's a global thermonuclear war, but it's restricted to the northern hemisphere, but it's heavily implied or told that the southern hemisphere is going to be wiped out by a wave of radiation. And there was all this discussion of people saying, no, that couldn't happen because there's not an exchange of atmosphere at the equator. But then other people said, no, it doesn't work that way. The atmosphere actually does exchange, but at higher levels, and then there would be volcanic explosions. So we're still discussing the on the beach, whether it wipes out Australia today. I believe 70 years later. So
yeah, I've seen the Brian Brown version of that film, and I think for like the 90s and the 2000s, if they needed like an Australian actor to like represent the country, they'd get Brian Brown.
Well, there was only one Australian actor in Australia apparently at that time, male. Yeah. Well, also the Crocodile Dundee. Those two covered a lot, like 90% of Australian roles.
Yeah. On the beach, yeah, that was an interesting one. I've seen the discussions where the radiation would sort of seep down to the southern hemisphere like that before. And just as an Australian, like that's a concerning outcome. Like if the northern hemisphere just wipes itself out, and then it's like, oh, by the way, it's coming for you too now. It's like, oh, God, we're not even involved in this.
Yeah, and the consensus, by the way, which I've looked up in the last 50 years, is that it wouldn't happen like in the movie, or just this wave of radiation because of this sort of break in atmosphere exchange, but it will happen eventually because water flows, volcanoes explode, and then also particles rise up to the upper reaches of the atmosphere. So all those people in the southern hemisphere who read like, hey, we don't have to worry about it. You do have to worry about it. Just it may take years, not 1 year. I think within the story space of the book and the first movie, I don't know, the second movie, Australia was doomed within a year, right? It was slow. And we can talk about the genre of the slow apocalypse, where it's coming. It's not like you've read some novels where there's an EMP burst and boom, that's it. Thursday at 2 a.m., everything's fine. Thursday 2:01, we start, eating our neighbors.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that recently. Well, I think like if we had like a year for the radiation to get there, I mean, like, well, it's a half-life, isn't it? Where like it decreases in potency. Like they say like 2 weeks underground in a shelter or something, and you should be able to go up to the surface for a bit. Like I'm hoping that would, lessen the radiation a bit by the time it gets to us.
Yeah, I again, I've read that it's not going to happen. Well, we can talk about this because I tell you what, I'd like to start off by naming some of the classics that I grew up with, and maybe you can tell me about some of like more recent ones because I have not caught up on book apocalypses. I've tended to be recently, the last 10 years, watched more movie, video game, TV apocalypses. But I grew up, the classics were On Beach, Earth Abides, where there's a guy is just, and I think it's in California, and he's a geologist or a geology student, and he's just out there. I think you were mentioning about an apocalypse happens and some people don't know about it because they're like camping or something. And literally he gets sort of secondhand. There's some disease that wipes out, I don't know, the vector was like maybe 98% of people and they just die off. And he's one of the survivors.
Yeah, I read that one years ago. That was a good one.
Yeah. And that was, it wasn't quite cozy apocalypse, but it was not Mad Max. I mean, there was like a couple of bad guys, and there was some theft, and I think there was like one shooting, but it was not the free for all there.
And I think they killed a guy as well.
Yeah, there was a guy who was I forgot the exact circumstances. There were diseased people. I mean, what's funny is without violence, they were going backward towards basically Stone Age existence without any warfare at post-apocalypse, which we'll talk about. So that was one. Another classic one for the United States was Alas, Babylon. That was the classic small town. The apocalypse happens. There's a nuclear war, and the town is affected. They're affected by like raider gangs and some radiation, but not like being wiped out radiation. And a national government is trying to reassert itself. A lot of modern apocalypses have borrowed from some of the tropes and folklore that was built by that. And those were among the classics of books that I recall. And there were other ones that probably aren't as famous. The Last Ship, which became the TV show, The Last Ship.
I've seen the show. I haven't.
Yeah, there's zero crossover except for some names. The apocalypse is caused by two different things. In the book, it's a nuclear war, and there's one last U.S. Navy destroyer left, and it's wandering around. That's 600 pages, like the summary of the plot. And then, of course, on TV, it was a disease. It was killing off people. So those are some of my early classics, and I think they. And then we get into. I mean, I could name like 100 movies, obviously, and some television shows. There weren't really that many television shows. The one that I really find interesting, I actually did an episode of another YouTuber, Park Narks. We did an episode on the Twilight Zone, episode 2. This is 1963, 2, starring a young Charles Bronson and a young Elizabeth Montgomery as two soldiers left over from a war in a maybe alternate Earth, but still a sort of Slavic bloc versus United States. And they're individual soldiers, and they sort of resolve, there's been this terrible war and most people have been killed, but what do we do now there? So there really wasn't a lot of post-apocalyptic television in the United States in the 60s and 70s. It's only, I think, the last 20 years that's just shot up as a genre.
I'm just trying to think, like Threads came out of the UK.
Yes, Threads was fantastic. Here on television, it was the day after, but a lot of us who love the genre thought Threads was much better. Very documentary style, like you felt like you were watching something just happening, like BBC documentary there, and bleak. No hope there whatsoever.
Well, actually, I'm just so many rabbit holes I could go down right now.
Well, let's just focus on one right now. And I don't mean to push the show, but you're looking at prepper apocalypse. And my impression, much less a studied person in this particular subgenre, is that these books at their central core have hope. Like that whatever comes, if you're ready, there's still going to be problems. Somebody you love is going to die. There's going to be violence, but like, because you prepared, there's hope, and there's not you prepare all you want, everybody's going to die. It's the opposite of that. Is that correct?
Okay, I'll take us one step back. I think hope is the key for any sort of good post-apocalyptic story, especially films. Like, have you seen, I think it's called The Divide. It's about like a nuclear war breaks out, and it's set in New York, and like a bunch of people run downstairs to the basement, and like the janitor there has like a sort of like a bunker set up.
I actually have downloaded that, but I have not. I mean, it's on my Apple iTunes, but I have not watched that yet. No.
Okay, I'm pretty sure his name's Michael Biehn. It's the guy from Aliens, Hicks.
Yes, Bane. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was the guy from Terminator 1. Yeah, the Kyle Reese. Yeah, I don't want to spoil it, but there's just no hope in that film, and it just leaves you drained. And it's just, I think it's a sort of key component because you've got like the subject matter is just so tense all the way through. I think if it's done properly, that you sort of need some sort of like nugget of hope.
Now, why do you say that? I'm interested in this. I mean, because of course we've named some ones that have hope, like Alas Babylon. There's a recovery, so to speak. I mean, things are bad, but like they're heading towards an eventual reestablishment. Where on the beach, didn't matter what you did, it's all over.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just trying to think of some others. Like, yeah, Earth Abides. That he sort of has the family, and they sort of like the tribe at that point, and they sort of carry on without him. Yeah. I just, hmm. Why do I think it's essential? Like, even the road has like that spark of hope at the end.
Yeah. So what I'm curious on, like, if you had to make a case, because this is the way I would talk about it in a classroom. I'd say, like, okay, why do we need hope? What story element, what narrative element, what character element, why do we need it?
Well, I think it's what separates it like post-apocalyptic fiction from apocalyptic fiction. Because the main difference there is that in apocalyptic fiction, everyone dies. Like there is, I think it's a William Defoe one. I think it's 444 or something. And it's like Earth's ozone layer is just gonna pop or something. And like you sort of see this guy's like breakdown and the breakdown of society all around him. And then it just sort of like ends and like everyone's dead. And there's another one. It's set in Australia, actually.
These final hours, right?
Yeah, yeah, that one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now, okay, so let's talk about these final hours. There's an Australian guy. He's actually portrayed as not being like an especially good guy. I think he's sort of a wastrel, as we might say, older generation. He's not the guy you necessarily put your hopes in for society or whatever, but he does one good thing. He rescues, I mean, he takes in this young girl who has lost her family, but then the world ends. Now, I personally thought it was a good film, right? But I guess I don't need hope. I just need a good story. And if the story ends with and then everybody died, that's fine for me. But I'd love to hear like why you think you would or why we need that there's a post.
For me, I guess that's what sort of separates the two sort of genres, subgenres, sub-subgenres. It's just that people have to survive and sort of carry on and rebuild. And if they sort of can't do that, because like the post-apocalyptic period, oh, I could get lost here as well. It's sort of this nebulous period, something like the Wild West. Like it's a time and a place in relation to something else. So it's in relation to the apocalyptic event. So if humanity sort of can't crawl their way out of it, then they've sort of just the apocalypse got them. It just took a little longer. So I'm just thinking about like, sorry, just for these final hours, like he gets the girl, he sort of rescues her, takes her where she wants to go, but then he goes back to his girlfriend slash slacker partner, and they sort of go out together. So that was his second good deed. I think he went back.
There was an American film which was supposed to be a comedy. I didn't think it was actually that funny, but it was clever. Seeking Friend for End of the World, which was almost the same movie, but and again, the world was going to end. But you said something really important, and also reminded me of a great Canadian movie I recommend called Last Night, where the world is going to end. They don't know exactly. I mean, they know why, but we don't know why. Nobody's told us. Whether it's a meteor or something. In Seeking Friend from the End of the World, we're actually told a meteor. And in fact, the plot of other movies is like subsumed because, like, in the first minutes of Seeking Friend for the End of the World, we're told like the space shuttle that was trying to blow up the meteor failed. So, like, Armageddon and Deep Impact, like, oh, throw those movies out. This is what happens after the failure to stop the meteor. That last night, Seeking Friend in the End of the World, these final hours, people are facing the end, like humanity is facing the end. But the hope to me is that they're accomplishing something they couldn't do in their regular life before this came along. The apocalypse in some way gives them the opportunity to, like, find somebody to love or reify their love or something like that, or do something good. Maybe they hadn't done something good before. In the Canadian film Last Night, which again is very low key, like there's no there, you see a couple overturned buses, but there's no Mad Max violence. And of course, we've got to go to Mad Max if we're going to talk about post-apocalypse, right? But like Mad Max is the standard of societal breakdown into animalistic free for all, right? And in the Canadian film Last Night, people are pretty civilized. There's one person, and she just loves her job so much She just goes to work and she wants to die on her job doing her work. And there's another guy who has like a checklist of every type of intimacy he'd like to have before he dies. So like literally everybody in the film is trying to check some boxes that are important to them. So to me, the hopeless ones actually have some element of human kindness, I guess, within them. Before you go, which of course is our hope for our lifetime as humans, right? Is that but we're not on our deathbed going, gosh, I have 20 things I wish I had done and never did them, right?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think. There was a TV show recently. It wasn't post-apocalyptic. It was Black Mass, I think it was called. Post JJ here. Just letting you know that the series I'm talking about is actually called Midnight Mass. Black Mass is a crime film starring Johnny Depp with some seriously ugly makeup on. But it's a good movie. You should go watch that as well. Anyway, Midnight Mass. That's what I'm talking about here. Back to it. Like a vampire sort of comes to like a small island town in the States and things unravel. And again, I'll spoil it. But at the very end, everyone in the town got turned into a vampire. And like they got tricked into burning all the houses down and the sun's coming up. And so they're all going to die. And so like everyone sort of like goes like, okay, yeah, we sort of went a bit evil. And we're just going to sort of try and use what time we've got left to sort of like atone. But like the one sort of, how do I put this? We don't really have this character in Australia. It's like the very ultra religious Karen. She's just sort of dobbing on everyone and like trying to nitpick. Anyway,
that's a favorite of Stephen King.
In the Mist. Yeah, she's in the Mist.
Yeah.
She's pretended to be like better than everyone the whole film, but as the sun's coming up right at the end, she just freaks out and she's just trying to dig her way into the sand to get away from the sun. Whereas everyone else is like, just accepting it. She just sort of freaks out. So yeah.
I think you really hit the nail on the head there, or the kangaroo, whichever one you use as a metaphor there, is atoning and acceptance are the themes of these struggle, but yet the apocalypse comes anyway type of content, right? And so there's a certain satisfaction there that these people didn't die it is religious in a way, right? Because of course, all religions say that if you do these things and say these prayers or feel this way or have this belief, then your death will not be in vain, right? I mean, it's probably 100,000 years ago, Neanderthals had some conception of that, right? So, and we've developed more sophisticated ways of expressing it, maybe, but the films still tap into that. See, I'm always interested when we should talk about like what's the difference between it. What would Australians a conversation? I'm always interested. Like for example, and I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent here, but like here in Texas, we've always had this running joke about how zombie apocalypses would last about 15 minutes because everybody would emerge from their house heavily armed and take out all the zombies. Wow, man, I always remember that zombie apocalypse that lasted from 2:30 to 2:45 on Wednesday, the 5th of August, and so there's no show, there's no movie, and the 15-minute apocalypse. That if I ever did a movie, that's what I'd do the Great Texas 15-minute apocalypse where, the zombies came and whether the cordyceps zombies or the Walking Dead zombies, and like they were taken out right away.
I could figure a way around that. But have you seen World War Z or read the book?
I've read the book and reluctantly watched the movie. Yeah.
Okay. I haven't read the book yet. I've seen the movie, but I thought that had like probably one of the best sort of zombie approaches I've seen. It's the CIA guy in the prison and he's got no teeth. And somehow this guy was embedded in North Korea. Like, I don't know how he stayed undercover in North Korea, but the second they found out the zombies were coming, the government's like, everyone pull your teeth out. And like that stops the zombie apocalypse because nobody's got teeth anymore. And like I was sitting in the movie theater and I was just like, oh my God, that is brilliant. Like nowhere else could do it, but just the fact that they did that.
Well, let me ask you a question. This may be an international question too, is that I guess it's a stereotype that Australians, New Zealand Anzacs, and Americans have certain commonalities, and one is that we're not necessarily going to do whatever government tells us to do right away, right? Where the perception is that in some other cultures and countries, we're if the government says like, okay, everybody line up to have your teeth pulled out, people would dutifully do that. I don't believe in vast generalizations about people and cultures and things like that, but I'm thinking now of, did you watch the television show, the first season, The Last of Us, which I guess is the most popular, famous apocalypse, post-apocalypse show now.
I've seen season one. I haven't seen season two yet.
Yeah, me too.
I've played both the games. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I was on another show, great YouTuber, Sword and Pen, and we were she's done a lot more on it than but I talked specifically, as you know, one of the people who did that did Chernobyl, which I think is some of the best television ever made. And I feel I can see sometimes where it's Chernobyl, and then sometimes when it's not Chernobyl, let's put it that way. And there's this one scene, if you recall, I think it's season 2 opener, where we see this. I'm blanking on whether this is an Indonesian scientist who explains.
Oh, episode 2.
Yeah, episode 2. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
She's in Indonesia. Yes.
Yeah, and what I loved about it was that it was so low key, right? It was so like she just says, okay, well, based on that information, you should drop a nuclear bomb on the city and kill all of us right now. And I was thinking to myself, now that'll never happen, right? There would be I mean, there have been scenarios in movies I've seen where they dropped a nuclear weapon. In fact, in the show, apparently there were some nuclear weapons dropped, but like that it happens that quickly, there's no government or government bureaucracy that's ever going to move that quickly to do something that drastic.
So first of all, I'm pretty sure Indonesia doesn't have nukes, but yeah, fireball in the city. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, they borrow. Call Australia. Who calls America?
Yeah. We need them for honest reasons. Just trust us.
Yeah, that would be the other thing. It's like the president of America, United States says, what? The president of Indonesia wants to borrow what?
Yeah, I remember the tone of that was very good. And I actually, yeah, we could get lost as well. I liked the games. The show was pretty good. They made a few interesting choices there, but overall, I think it worked pretty well. Like, again, like I'm a massive fan of the genre, obviously, but when The Last of Us, the game came out, I actually didn't play it for a few years just because I saw the conversation around it. And I was like, oh, I don't want to be involved in this. I think I sort of got picked up by like the sort of Tumblr crowd. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm just not interested in that. But yeah, it's interesting sort of watching the cultural phenomenon it's become recently. But as for the zombie things, I think if you want, like, I could write a story where a zombie virus takes out Texas. I think it's just when you're sort of making these things, you can't just hand wave it away and say like, oh yeah, they're just zombies, so they got shot in the head, they die, and they take Texas. Because anyone who lives in Texas is going to be like, no, my grandma could take them out.
I don't understand the zombies or the controlled creatures in Last of Us because I didn't play the games. I don't know enough lore. I feel what I was presented in the first season just didn't make sense. But I'll leave it there because I just don't know enough. The zombies I've seen in traditional zombie movies like the Vincent Price Last Man on Earth, through World War Z, through Omega Man, through the Walking Dead, I didn't see what was the big deal based on my knowledge of Texas. But I could see how it would be a big deal for people in London. We can write off London, write off Canberra, right? But so this is really interesting. Tell me what it would take to work up a sweat in Texas.
Okay, just so the heads up for the difference between the game and the show of The Last of Us is that like it's like a powder, like a wheat protein or something. It's like a fungus in the wheat proteins or something, and that's what sort of allows it to be spread around the world in like the food products.
Yeah, I didn't buy that at all. Yeah.
But if I wanted to write a story to take out Texas or any other sort of like armed place, I'd have to make it a situation where the incubation period is long enough that you wouldn't be able to tell who's infected, and it would just slowly infect you over time. So not even like bites or something. There's been a few zombie, I think it's games, maybe it's a cartoon or an anime or something where like they cough and they're coughing out like the cloud, and like that's the cloud is what infects you. I mean that's how it works in the Last of Us games. And that's actually something they changed for the show, because in the games, like there's spores, and spores is actually what typically gets people.
Yeah, but then the TV show, they're like right next to one of these creatures, and I'm thinking, you're not breathing the spores right next to them, you know? I mean that's
Yeah. I think they took the spores out of the show because like in the game, like the Boston, right outside the quarantine zone. Also, I've said this elsewhere. You quarantine sick people, you don't quarantine healthy people. They they like bombed the city. And so there's all these like fantastic ruins, just sort of like leaning towers, just overgrown and everything. It looks amazing. But like why would you fire like bomb spores? It's just going to send them up into the air and over the wall and into your city.
but you've made a really good point, is that a slow apocalypse might be much more deadly. Now again, the prepper books you're reading, I did read some in this genre, not the ones that you've read, October 4, and I forgot the name of the other one that you've read. I read was it William? Oh my gosh, that the it's an EMP blast. He was probably a bestseller in the genre there. It's just a small town in Virginia, and there's an EMP blast by some nefarious foreign nation. So that, that we're all in trouble, right? EMP blast, right? At least in the area where it is. And I mean, unless you were a super prepper and like your house is a Faraday cage or something like that, then you're gonna uh, you're gonna be challenged by. Are you saying that's sort of the best scenario for preppers? Is there's not actual destruction except rioting or something like that, but the EMP blast is sort of the cleanest thing where you're like your food stores that you've been prepping and your ammunition is still intact.
So, from what I can tell, the prepper audience wants stories that they can obviously prepare for. So, they're not really interested in like supernatural events like zombies or like Armageddon or like aliens or anything like that. That's they can't really prepare for that, like realistically. So, they want events that could, reasonably happen. And an EMP is clean. It takes out the power grid. It doesn't blow stuff up normally. Like, it doesn't cause like widespread damage, but it takes out the communications. It takes out like typically like the transport network, like what do you call it? Supply lines, stuff like that.
Logistical supply chain, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it puts American specifically back to sort of like a Wild West sort of like frontier era sort of thing. Like you're on your own, and if you can't make it on your own, there's no societal sort of like safety net there to sort of have your back. So it's like a proof of character. Like if you can survive this, you're like a genuine tough person. And typically there's always talk of like, we're going to rebuild America. Like we're going to be the ones to do it. This sort of like wipes away everyone else who can't hack it, the fake ones, and we're here. Now, I haven't read like that many stories in this genre just yet, but there are a few trends that I'm noticing in the ones I've chosen.
Well, talked about specifically focusing on warfare, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we could just let you, because you've given a great opening to that. The preppers are able to continue some level of modern warfare because they've saved, as you've enumerated, they've saved a lot of ammunition and a lot of guns. And of course, what distinguishes one element of modern warfare is a lot of ammunition and a lot of guns. Of course, that's more maybe World War II warfare than today's warfare. I mean, if you look at today's warfare, we have a lot of smart, drones and exploding pagers, and I mean, just like the warfare is missiles, guided missiles, things like that. But as you say, this takes us back to, it's not quite the good old days, but the days where an individual mattered.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So the issue with this sort of thing is that when you're making a story, sometimes you sort of like need things to happen just for the story to make sense in a sort of way. Like, have you ever seen like alien invasion movies? They always come and they land on Earth and they have like a good firefight in the street.
Yes, Battle Los Angeles was probably my favorite of that genre. Is the aliens land, and they're really sort of like just North Koreans or Russians or something like that. I mean, they have weapons, and they actually have an EMP, some sort of something, right? Like but they're not so advanced as to be ridiculous. You can like get into a firefight with them and defeat them, and like a American missile will take down their mothership and things like that.
I've actually watched that film like at least 16 times at this point, just because like
Huh. Yeah, I mean, I've watched it five. I mean, I admit I love that film. I think it's an excellent.
Okay, possible overshare. I apologize in advance. I actually saw it with my dad the day before he died, and so I just watch it
Wow.
every year. And so like it's just like I'm glad it's like a decent movie because otherwise I'd be stuck
Well, we
watching
can
a
do a whole
horrible
show
movie.
on that movie. I guess I'm ready to. Let's do it.
Okay, oh, I'm down for that. I'm down for that.
It has some real classic elements there. I mean, I love to. You're much more of an expert. I guess you're a Battle Los Angeles scholar, but do your dissertation on Battle Los Angeles. But it, I just feel it does a lot of things really well. Feels realistic. Feels like these are actual soldiers, and they do what people would do in situations like that. And the aliens are not like too crazy weird, but like they're also they have some elements that make them different than a lot of other aliens I've seen attacking Los Angeles.
You can see them and you can believe them. Like, okay, yeah, that makes some sort of sense. It's freaky, but I can see how that would work. Like just the physiology.
But the point going back to prepper fiction is that actually preppers could help out in that battle because they can be taken down by machine gun fire, or throw a grenade at them. They're not they wouldn't just wave their gigantic mega blaster and wipe everybody out right away.
So my point with bringing up the alien movies is that you need the aliens to come down to the planet and fight in the street because otherwise, like, it's not a movie. Because otherwise, it's just missiles shooting up into space and like flying saucers hiding behind the moon and just lobbing meteors at us. Like, it's not a good movie. Like, you need some sort of face to get behind and like, okay, I'm rooting for that guy. There's like, so with these prepper stories, like, I've only read a bunch of like book ones. So I haven't sort of seen any like the follow up to the EMPs. Like it's always like, oh, some foreign nation EMP'd us. And then it just never comes. Like there's no follow up attack. I'm assuming they attack at some point. I hope they do anyway.
Yes.
But I mean, like, if you're EMPing a country because you want to take it out, like, why would you send troops in afterwards? I just fly planes over and just bomb it.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that. In Battle Los Angeles, as you recall, the one part that I found clunky was they have a scientist saying total BS, like, well, the Earth is the only place in the universe that has like liquid water. I'm going like, nah, I think aliens can figure out how to take the trillion gallons of water on that's not why they're here. However, I'm going to reference my two. I know we're going micro here, but I want to reference my two favorite end of the world. I'm probably giving away, let's just say, facing the apocalypse short stories that have ever been written. One is set in Australia. I always mispronounce this. This is from, gosh, Jonathan, a message to the king of Brobrandran. It's an environmental apocalypse, but it's a slow moving apocalypse. And there's a moment there where somebody literally calls the Prime Minister of Australia and says, this is what has happened. You must get a nuclear bomb from the Americans and drop it within the next 24 hours. And I won't give away what happened, but they don't. Okay. And then the other short story, which I think is like the Twin Towers, the two best slow apocalypses and clever apocalypses. There was an incredible science fiction writer. She wrote under the name of James Tiptree Jr. Her real name was Alice Sheldon. Very interesting. She was a CIA analyst and a PhD in psychology. Very interesting life. She wrote a story called The Screwfly Solution, which is it was remade into like a Masters of Horror TV show, which was not well done, but it is the most horrifying fiendish alien plot. And now, why would you not blow things up? Because we have a beautiful planet and I'd like to capture it intact so that I can set up my summer palace there. I think that's the reason why somebody wouldn't want to blow things up. They'd just like to take over an intact place, right? I mean, they're not Germans invading Russia where they just bombed everything it took over ruined cities like Stalingrad. It seems to me that unless aliens have some sort of religion that they just want to destroy everything, they wouldn't mind just getting rid of us and then taking over the planet without us here, but everything else intact. So that's why in Battle Los Angeles, to me, that's my interpretation of why they send in infantry and like try to win battles tactically rather than just, as you say, lobbing asteroids into our ocean.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you can come up with any number of reasons why they're not doing it. And I think that's actually the point. Like, you just need them to not do the thing that makes the most sense. Again, like if I'm trying to take out America, yeah, infrastructure makes sense. The what is it? You've got like three power networks. I forget the term. I'm blanking on it completely.
Grid.
Texas is its own, yeah, grid. Oh God, Texas is its own grid. There's like two others, I think, in America. You take them out, that's going to take a lot of people out eventually as well. I mean, if you've got viruses, I mean, if you've got EMPs, you've got viruses, put them in as well.
If you do that, you really should be on Saturn when you do that. Because if you're in Moscow or Beijing, doing that certainly hurts the United States. But this is where we go to the question of warfare, because a lot of these properties we talk about, there's in Battle Los Angeles, the American military is semi intact, right? There's still fighter planes, there's still helicopters, there's still guys with machine guns, right? And missiles, right? So, okay. And this is where some of the prepper books, I struggle because an EMP is not going to take out our nuclear submarine. So whoever did this, they're going to pay.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, I don't think this is a good idea.
Yeah. So that's why it's less of a possible scenario because I mean I can understand a terrorist group wanting to do this, although the mechanics of like nuclear weapons and getting them and then EMPing them, that's one thing. But like any country that does this, then we're going to go full on the beach, probably.
I think Jericho did that pretty well, actually. I mean, it turned out to be a
And
false
I didn't see
flag.
that. Please go.
Oh my, okay, Jericho's pretty good. It's like two seasons and then like three comic books afterwards. But yeah, it's for nuclear war. It's pretty good. It's sort of more like day-to-day life of like a small town America from like 2005. So it's pretty good. I enjoyed it. But again, like they need to ignore the nuclear submarines that are just circling in the deeps because that's going to ruin the story. Like they need to not have the government come in and just be like, "Hey, yeah, don't worry, we're prepped for this as well." Like it's called like what is it? You guys have got like the contingency of governance or something, where it's like if the
Continuity of
continuity of government. That's it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that's referred to in I mean I remember in that it's sort of like a running theme like in the last Babylon, and this was a big deal for the 1950s. The president of the United States is a woman who's the like cabinet secretary for like education or something like that, but in the continuity of government she's the only one left alive, right? So and that's often a theme in these. I know in the last ship there was continuity of government and so on. I'm sure most countries have, non-dictators don't like to name successors, so I don't think people, most other countries where dictatorships don't have that. Anyway, but this is what's interesting to me is that warfare immediately devolved to, as you said, Wild West. Having like a tank division doesn't seem to help in a lot of these prepper fiction books.
I don't know if that's because of the EMP or because preppers couldn't reasonably fight against that. No one, I don't think anyway, has ever sent like an F-16 against like preppers in these stories. Because like, what are you going to do? Or like a missile or something, just because like the story can't continue with that sort of threat against it. So this is just one of those sort of things you sort of have to like hand wave away and be like, yeah, that's not really there. Like they're there elsewhere in the story. They exist, but they're being utilized elsewhere for bigger threats or something.
In the Mad Max universe, because I did watch Mad Max, the first film, and then of course The Road Warrior, great movie, probably to me the best post-apocalyptic adventure action movie ever. And I think I've watched everything except Furiosa. I've never watched like the cartoons or comic books. I'm one of those people like who says like, hey, don't tell me everything is explained in comic book number 37. Like it has to be on the screen. All right. But in that universe, it's projected that there's a slow collapse of order because in the first movie, like Max is a policeman, right? He's a trying to keep order as a police officer, but like things are breaking down, right? And I guess the Australian army just dissipates.
Oh, okay. First of all, you've not seen Furiosa? You just don't want to watch it?
No, I just haven't. I mean, in my list of things to do, I certainly will, but I just
Yeah, yeah.
haven't caught up to that apocalypse yet.
I saw it. It was actually pretty good. But there's another movie with Guy Pearce called The Rover, and it's set in Australia as well. And it's just basically the same setup, sort of like set in like a Mad Max 1 sort of era. And like the military's there, they just don't care. Like they're securing train lines. They're like going after like really bad criminals, but they just don't care. They just want to get paid and just go home. And so like the breakdown of society is just amazing to watch just unfold throughout this entire movie. Like people are just killing each other, and soldiers are just like, oh yeah, it's not my problem. Like, look, as long as the paperwork's okay, I don't care. Okay, so whatever.
Do you feel that in the first season of Last of Us, the Fedra, I mean, I was a little confused about the authorial stance on Fedra, and of course, this brings in like how when the government collapses and suddenly you rise to the top of your local society because you've been prepping and you've been the smart guy who's ready for the post collapse, then the forces of like order to some extent are the enemy, right? Because that you'd return to your job as an accountant.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that sort of implied? Because I felt Fedra. I'm babbling now, but like it was clear to me that Fedra was bad, but then they were trying to make some point when they went to Kansas City that like the people fighting Fedra, the Fireflies were good, but this other group, which was not the Fireflies, which took over Kansas City, were not good. It wasn't clear to me what the stance was on Fedra.
So in the show, they humanize Fedra a lot more because like Ellie actually grows up in like a Fedra orphanage, and they're actually trying to like train her and like prepare her for the world sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's sort of not really touched
Which
on.
is usually a good thing, right? I mean, like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
wouldn't you want to like have orphanages that train people to live in the post-apocalyptic world? So, I mean, is that a bad thing?
Well, it's one of those things where like I think after like the Iraq War, the second one, the more recent one, like things got decidedly worse after like Saddam got taken out or out of power, just because like he sort of had things up and running and they were stable, and like he was, not good, but things sort of for the day-to-day life they sort of progressed reasonably well. And once that was taken away, I mean it's like yay democracy, but also there's no power, so you know.
Right. So that's interesting to me because to me, one of my critiques of Hollywood is they seem to want it both ways. They like it when characters say, we believe who characters fight for freedom and democracy and like walking through the Wyoming compound. And here's our religious center, multi-faith, of course, like I just thought that was one of the funniest lines ever.
That was in the TV show, right?
Yeah, that was in a TV show. I just thought like, yes, yes, of course, because it's Hollywood. We want to be reassured it's a multi-faith center there. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I find it interesting that Hollywood, like George Lucas in the prequels, like, democracy is great. You can't have your character saying, no, democracy sucks. We don't want democracy, right? There's a famous line in the movie Cromwell. I don't know whether King Charles II actually said this. He said, democracy, Mr. Cromwell, is a Greek drollery. You know, very great British line. But can we have democracy, right? The actual Greeks who talked about democracy thought democracy could only exist on a small scale. So maybe the preppers are saying like, hey, we'll have freedom and the American way, but we'll have it with like 400 people in a small town. We can't have it on the federal level post-apocalypse. Is that what they're saying?
From what I've seen, yeah. Like, again, I've said this before, but I feel like the morality of preppers isn't really nailed down. Like, they'll steal stuff, but then they'll kill looters and raiders.
Yes, you brought that up about
Yeah.
they'll take free food, but won't. But we'll give a water bottle to one old couple.
But again, I feel like that's just part of that's not really what they do. It's just to sort of smooth things over from the author. Yeah, I'm noticing a lot of weird things. Like, I don't know what sort of groups they would like. Like, okay, without getting too much into current real world politics, I remember hearing about like this whole visa situation in America. Like, you come to America, you work on a visa, and you can become like a citizen or something. And that sort of split some party because like some people want America to be like, yeah, if you come here and you excel, that's great. We want that, but we're already here and we're excelling, so we're okay because it works for us. But the second it starts working for too many of outsiders, it's just that's when they don't want it. So I don't know if they really want like the American way. I think they might want their version of the American way because like America, very, very multicultural country. It's a settler society. Like people from all over the world from go to America. Like my dad was from America, but I'm also noticing something with like the cast of characters in these books, and yeah, they all seem to be from one sort of region of the world. So at least majority wise, anyway. So
Yeah, because I think one of the questions we always ask, and is, I mean, there's morality, the individual choices, right? And then there's ethics, the societal choices. I know that's sort of forced and artificial as a divisor, but like, can you be a moral person in the scarcity of post-apocalyptic? My favorite character in the entire history of post-apocalyptic fiction is Carol on The Walking Dead.
yeah, she has an arc, doesn't she?
Yeah, everybody should study Carol as an example. And I love The Walking Dead un, until season seven, and then to me it fell apart completely. So I only speak about seasons 1 through 6.5 of The Walking Dead. To me, Carol is like, in terms of literature and characterization, she has this wonderful, absolutely plausible arc from going from a victim, domestic violence, very timid, scared, not sure what to do. You would classify her as not somebody who's going to be really helpful for your team. You know, you're putting together a team to survive the apocalypse. You wouldn't necessarily put her on it, but she, over time, learns skills, becomes confident, and becomes a stone cold protector of what she defines as her family. So that she's like on the A team. And she's got her own series now with Daryl Dixon. That's how popular a character she was. But the point was that she made a lot of moral choices. Like, she murders children, right? She does not hesitate. There's none of this, like a lot of times in post-apocalyptic books. You've talked about this. There's like a transition period where people are going like, oh my gosh, are we going to go back to the level of barbarism? And of course they do. But they have to talk about it, right, before they do. But you've talked about, like, in some of these books that you've read, the transition isn't that long.
No. And yeah. And when I read it, it just happened like straight away. Like the news broke and just it was like a switch as everyone went crazy. And I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. That's what they wanted to happen, so it happens. So yeah. But I think that I'm trying to decide if that says something about the author's worldview or if it's just again something they need to happen for the story to make sense or their story to make.
Well, what do you think would, I mean, again, maybe the answer is different in different societies, but what do you think would happen in where you grew up? I mean, the funny thing, as you pointed this out yourself, is like, for example, in The Walking Dead, they never use the word zombie. And it's like a line from that character in Galaxy Quest. Have you guys ever watched the show? People in zombie movies rarely have seen zombie movies and zombie television shows. Like in Last of Us, nobody's played a video game, and nobody's watched a TV show or a movie about zombies or before, and they have to discover from scratch, how to take them out and all that. But like these preppers and like everybody in society, I mean, it's hard to think of anybody who hasn't like watched post-apocalyptic scenarios. Aren't we sort of ready for the breakdown of society happening in 5 minutes?
Well, okay, that's actually something interesting that preppers do because in these books they do read into the world books, but in other like more mainstream movies and films, TV shows about this sort of stuff, nobody's seen it. Like, I imagine if like a prepper zombie book, would they have read zombie books? Like, that feels like a paradox there. Like, I don't know which one would win out. Like, that's actually interesting. I'll have to look into that. I have a zombie guy. I'll ask him. I'll see what he says. But no, I think for Carol, I think one of the important things for Carol is that she became who she became because she had a group with her at the start. Like, she couldn't have become that if she was on her own at the start. She sort of had to be like sheltered at the start and like grow over time. So, like, I guess that is an argument for like, working together and like you may have someone who's not very useful at the start, but they can develop into someone reliable and like, dependable. But there is like another guy. I think he's called like Nick. He's I may have stopped watching before you.
I stopped watching when Glenn died.
Okay, it was before Glenn died. It was the coward who nearly got Glenn killed and then kills himself and lands on Glenn. And they sort of used him as like a fake out. Like the zombies were eating this other guy who killed himself and Glenn was under him and he used that sort of to escape.
Right, right.
So he's like a character who would have been like useless the entire time and sort of never really got a chance to, or never chose to, or could sort of develop into someone, dependable. Whereas Carol went down the other path.
Now, in the real world, so one of the books I wrote was a history of the visualization of warfare. And I was interested going back to not just 17th century painting, but like the Neolithic, where we have the first images. And there's a very famous one that I have in my book from Australia, by the way, where we have rock paintings or rock carvings, sometimes in caves, sometimes outdoors, of war, of battles. Like you can tell that there's one organized group. In fact, the Australian one is very interesting. I'm blanking out where it came from, but I read the analysis by the Australian anthropologists and archaeologists who are working on this, that you can see that there's organization. Like, for example, the two guys who are squaring off at the head of each other's group are physically larger and have bigger headdresses than everybody else. So here you have something, I forgot the exact date, like 10,000 years ago, where already there's some distinguishment of who's the boss, right? I always tell people, like, you don't have to be a Mayan or an Egyptian or a Hittite specialist. You can be a 5-year-old child and you can say, who's the most important person in this painting or this picture? And they can usually pick out the pharaoh, the Assyrian king, right? They're bigger, everybody's bowing towards them. They have sun behind them or something like that. The point is that in prehistory, there must have been a pretty skills and capability based system. In the television show Last of Us, Joel is described several times as you're capable. Like, so post-apocalypse, you sort of want the capable people on your team. Like if somebody said like, oh yeah, I'm an amateur blacksmith and I do black powder, I go like, oh man, can you be on my team? I think you're going to be a really useful guy.
Okay, so in terms of like warfare and like tribe participation. Okay, so first of all, I think like back in the day, like capability, like I think like peasants didn't really have the chance to grow and become like the biggest, bravest warriors because they didn't have the training, they didn't have the weapons, they didn't have the food. You just wouldn't be able to sort of get to that position. Maybe you could be like a scrapper or something. I think like with Joel, he did sort of become because he was like a tradesman before the zombie apocalypse happened. So he was like physically fit. He's lost his kid, so he's like emotionally broken. So he doesn't care about anyone else. He doesn't want to lose his brother, so he's just focused on keeping him alive and he'll like sacrifice everything else. So I think there is an element of like casting aside like the old world morals that will aid you until Abby comes and bashes your brain in with a golf club.
Yeah, and going back to what you were saying, so I'm talking about like pre-history, pre-civilization. It helped to be the chief's son, but if you couldn't actually pull it off in hand-to-hand warfare with clubs, then being the chief's son was of no value, right? Like nepotism could get you only so much before you proved you weren't as capable as Gork, who wasn't the chief's son, right? But then absolutely, once we came in hierarchies, then family became more important and more likely for your status. So that's one of the interesting things that, I mean, obviously post-apocalypse. What is that great? What's one of my favorite lines from Mad Max Thunderdome when he goes to Bartertown and there's that great. I guess he's an Australian actor. The only movie I ever saw him on, he plays like he's a large man, bald head, and he like runs the trade area or something for Bartertown. And Mel Gibson says, I have capabilities. And this guy says, the brothel's full.
Yeah.
I don't remember whether that was exactly Mel Gibson's line, but it was very cute. It was a very cute point.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
like not every skill is going to be useful everywhere, but like obviously preppers aren't going to say like you correctly pointed out. It seems like in fact, I've noticed this in a lot of not just prepper, but a lot of post-apocalyptic fiction. Somebody's daughter is usually the at start more capable one, and the son is weaker. But you don't say, hey son, it's the apocalypse now. I'm going to have to cut you loose, right?
No. But on the other side of that, you think about like, okay, so your blacksmith who can make gunpowder, what if he's got some like pretty negative character traits?
Yeah.
at what point do you start balancing things out and be like, ah, yeah, he's useful, but like, oh, he's causing problems.
Well, okay, can you name me? Because I always thought that would be a very interesting premise where you're trying to put together. I mean, this is a huge problem as a prototype example. Intentional communities really struggle, right? In fact, most like intentional utopias in history have fallen apart for different reasons, mainly being human beings, maybe you could argue, are just basically selfish and they don't want to give up everything for the group. But also they fall apart because, yeah, there's the blacksmith, has a thing for your daughters, and like, no, I don't care how good a blacksmith you are. You're not going to be in my group. Yeah. And I'm trying to actually think of movies, television, games where that dilemma comes up, where somebody, usually a bad guy is capable only like killing or something like that. There, you've suggested a really interesting plot point.
Okay. So, first of all, again, personal story. I was working with a woman just in Taiwan a few months ago, and somehow we got talking about like if like post-apocalyptic survival, and she's thought about it, her zombie survival plan, and she's like, I'm going to secure my building, and then I'm going to methodically kill all the fathers. And I was like, what? What?
What?
What is that? And she's like, because they're going to put the survival of their families above the survival of the group.
Okay. And the mothers won't?
Yeah, I was like, what are you going to do with the mums and the kids? Like, they're going to figure it out. And she's like, yeah, but then the group will be stable and we'll all just look after each other. I'm like, that's what the dads are for.
No, no offense, but I don't want your friend in my group. Okay.
Yeah, no, yeah, no. But no, there's a video game called State of Decay. There's one and two, and basically you need to put together a small community of survivors. You start with three, but then you pick up random other ones, and they've all got like randomly generated character traits. It's actually very interesting because there is always going to be more survivors, so you can be very very picky. And it's like you get someone who's like immune to the plague. You're like they can carry twice as much as anyone else. They're very good with guns, but they snore, so they give a morale penalty to everyone. So like, nah, get out.
That's very clever. Yeah. I was just thinking of how many movies and television shows and games where they don't have that. I mean, I guess people who play role-playing games, you must have a situation where like this guy is an incredible mage, but he's so irritating.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm trying to think of a game or something. Like I suppose like Bill from The Last of Us. It's like yeah, he's a really good like he finds stuff. He's really talented and skilled, but he's really difficult. Like we just have to leave him out there on his own, give him some space. Because like I just don't think they want that sort of like situation to pop up in these stories. Like that's what I mean. Like these characters that don't really face any situations that are like actually a problem. It's like yeah, okay, like the neighbor didn't prepare as much, so we can't let him in a little prepper group anymore. And like that's the big moral quandary.
Yeah, but what do you do with that? I had a conversation years ago with a friend of mine who actually was a prepper and like wrote about prepping, and he admitted the biggest problem with being a prepper was people knowing you were a prepper. He said people taking away you're like an ant, you've built up all this stuff over time, and then the grasshopper comes and says, thanks for doing all this. I'm going to take you out, and then I get to keep all your stuff. So that builds paranoia, doesn't it?
I think okay, realistically, I think the main threat isn't the grasshopper. I think it's the other ants you've told. If people know you're not scared, and like I'm trying to think of his name. Do you know? There's a guy who wrote a book about like Soviet sort of communism, and like one of the things was that like they would start looking for people who had food, who were hiding food, and it's like they could tell by like the look on your face because you still had like sort of a bit of fat in your cheeks, and it's like your body would betray you like that. So it's like okay, clearly you've still got food, so we're gonna get you. And it's sort of like if you're in like a situation where like no one is meant to have food, and you're the one family who's not complaining, and you all look healthy, people are gonna figure it out pretty quickly. So yeah.
Yeah. So I guess there's two choices. One is, and going back to warfare, is you can avoid warfare by just like disappearing, right? Like you're off the grid in the forest. There's Irish movie that I saw from a couple of years ago with like the survivalist or something, and he's like one guy. He and his brother were in this little shack in like the woods of Ireland, living alone, just avoiding people. And of course, people come things like that. So there's like scenario one is you and your family just go to a corner of the world and hope nobody notices, And then, but see, my problem with that, and maybe this is a separate show, is that cans can only last so long, right? Especially, I mean, if you're just worried about your survival, if you're 50 years old and you're just worried about making it for another 25 years, first of all, hope you packed some sort of dialysis or whatever. I mean, there's some things that you're going to face in life that like you can't prep for. But do you want your grandchildren to survive? You can't just live on cans, right? And dried corn. Okay, so you're going to have to start medieval agriculture. I mean, this is the logistics is a separate show, but like this is a problem I have. So then I go to scenario number two is you got to rebuild a community, and like you can build walls. Like, I mean, Jericho. I mean, Jericho, of course, is named after like the first, I don't know if it's still considered to be the first actual city, Jericho, in the Middle East. But you have a community and you have separation of labor. Different people can do different things and you rely on each other and you man the wall, right? And you have agriculture. Then your grandchildren might survive, but you'd have to work together with people, right?
Yeah, you'd have to work with people. Yeah. Yeah. So a few things. First of all, you said cans will only last so long. My hometown in Australia at the moment is actually called Cairns, like Cairns. So I was like, what? Why are you bringing my town into this?
Oh, Cairns is going to go first. We know that. Yeah.
Well, actually, that's a pretty Wild West sort of place, very remote. Second, with farming, I don't think people appreciate how much time and effort it takes to farm food to feed people. Like, they're like, yeah, okay, we got a town of 100 people. We'll just get 10 to farm and, we'll be good. It's like, no, 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 no.
For most of human history, 90%, 95% of people were doing back-breaking physical labor to feed everybody all day.
Yeah. Like, there's a reason horses were like man's best friend for a long time. And then we got cars and we got rid of them all. So we may need them back at some stage.
Yeah, horses and cats are very useful, and dogs are very useful in agriculture. That's why cats domestic. I always joke. I'm a cat lover. I always joke that cats domesticated us, and not the other way around, because they just showed up and said, "Okay, look, we'll make you a deal. You scratch me, keep me warm. I'll get rid of these mice. Your children won't starve. Deal? Let's go. Okay, that's pretty good. Dogs less useful guard the perimeter maybe, but I'd rather have cats post-apocalypse than a dog if I have agriculture.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah.
But you tell me that the prepper fiction, they love dogs.
Yeah, yeah. Even the one I just read, like a major plot point of that one is that she gets a dog and it's just she adopts it because, that's the mark that she's a decent person.
It's not a Chihuahua.
No, it's some giant golden retriever thing. It's not a golden retriever, it's some like bigger, stronger version of that. They're usually white or something. I haven't recorded that episode yet, but that's actually been an interesting one. So running out into the wilderness or building a community. Those are your two options.
But you're saying, and I agree completely, building a community. I'm not sure there's been I haven't watched Jericho, so I'm not sure. I like The Last Babylon because they talked about like they were living near a river and so they were able to fish. And they talked about how boring it was and how hungry they got because they were just eating these lean fish day after day, and there wasn't enough fat, in their diet. We forget about how fat was for 99% of human civilization. Fat was great. We love fat.
Washing clothes, mending clothes, like it's not going to be fun. It's going to be back to basics, and like basics is not fun.
I think that's a really good way to put it. Basics is not fun, and warfare. Again, you can certainly store a lot of ammo, but especially if your enemies store a lot of ammo, you're going to run out at some point. And you're going to have to relearn a lot of skills. I mean, for example, modern ammo, right? I mean, I actually know people who like make their own bullets, right? And then I know people who do what's called black powder, like 18th century, 17th century, Last of the Mohicans type stuff, which is probably the highest we could aspire post electricity.
Well, actually, that's something Mad Max does well because they're all peeing and they use the pee to make the gunpowder.
Yeah.
Yeah, like not many people know that. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Cool.
But it's not, yeah, they have, I remember the Humongous, certainly when I was a kid, boy, he was my favorite character. I found out he was an Australian wrestler and gosh, I always wanted to meet him. Anyway, he's got that one gun with like 6 bullets, and that's all that's left of like modern warfare, and of course they have the cars. I don't know if it was fully explained. I guess these were today's cars. I don't think could go EMP. Every car would die in an EMP today.
Well, that's another point they do in these stories. It's the old cars that survive, and all these
Yeah,
preppers have always got an old car. That's got to be in there. I think even that, like going back to like travel, like you said, most modern cars are going to get taken out by an EMP, and most people aren't going to have like a well-maintained car. I think it's the carburetor. I'm not sure. I'm not a car
well, just
guy.
all the computer stuff, right? And everything's run by software today, right?
I think it's like anything pre seven, it's like 74 or something, 74, 76. Anything
Yeah.
before that will work fine, but anything after is going to have this computer stuff in it and it's just going to break apart.
And you brought it up too, and that's been a scene in a lot of movies and books I remember reading. It's like, yeah, somebody's got a Model T lying around,
Yeah.
but you immediately become a target.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like having fat in your cheeks. Like everybody like, okay, I mean, you can't not help but notice somebody driving around the car. So it becomes much less useful to have these things post-apocalypse because that puts a big target on your head.
Yeah. But I think they know that as well. Just, again, I think it was the first book I read. Like he's got his truck and he drives home and he gets back to his like a little walled estate and someone immediately comes up and offers to buy the car. Like, no one's going to do that. But like the story needed it to happen just so he could be like, no, I know what I've got. I'm not going to sell this thing.
Does he shoot him?
No, he just lets him go.
Yeah, but see that is that a mistake?
Well, I see that's it. Like, if that had been like a genuine encounter that happened, I'd be like, okay, this guy knows I have a car. He's probably going to come back. So, what do I do? Do I like drive around the block and just keep going? Or do I say I'm just visiting friends and I live elsewhere? But because the author only wanted it to happen to sort of prove a point, it doesn't go beyond that. Like, think about all these people. Like, if you send your husband out to like, or your wife or something out to find food or something, and like, if they walk too close to the prepper and they're like, stay away from my supplies, just kills him. You can be like, I'm going to get that guy.
Yeah, I spent part of my life in Pennsylvania, and here in Texas we have Mennonite communities. In Pennsylvania, as you know, there's a lot of different communities that are related. Pennsylvania Deutsch, Pennsylvania Dutch, Amish, and Mennonite, and
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know what Mennonites are. I don't think we have that in my country.
they are. Uh, have you seen like the Amish? They ride around in buggy. I mean, well,
Yes.
there's different levels. Like for example, the Mennonite community that lives near us here, I see them at Costco because the supermarket, mega market, because they drive here in their car. So there's different communities that allow different levels of technology. There are communities, I know them from Pennsylvania who they live in the 19th century. They drive horse and buggy. They do I don't know what the exact rules are. Like I think that they will use a telephone in an emergency and things like that. And they'll get a ride, an emergency or something like that. But we've talked. In fact, I think there's a couple of books I've read like where they're the one people who are ready day one, except for the fact that they live near Philadelphia, right? So in certain apocalypses, they have to face the possibility of like 2 million hungry non-19th century people coming to take their stuff.
Okay. I understand what Mennonites are now. Okay, cool.
Well, I mean, again, I don't want to. There's different groups that have different beliefs, but there are that go along this range of like no modern technology to yes modern technology, but we're still religious and live in communities and people dress certain ways.
It's still America, though. Do they have guns?
Uh, yes, I think so. Yeah, that's a good question. I've never. They're again. I really don't want to like say all Australians believe this or something like that because we're talking about millions of people. If you've and if you watch that movie Witness with Harrison Ford, and I mean, that group apparently, when they were they allowed them to go on English. They call us the English because because most of them are at least in the Pennsylvania Deutsch, which are called Pennsylvania Dutch, are descended from Protestant dissenters who came over from Germany, and they were persecuted, and like a lot of people who came to the United States like that. But my point was that a lot of them have amazing skills from 19th century cows and things like that. This is where warfare is a problem because no matter how much you prepare or like you're ready, the military is always going to be more ready for you than you. And I know in some, like I remember in World War Z, like the military is overrun. I think the book and in the movie, in the military, certainly they can fire a lot, but they're still overrun by zombies. And Walking Dead, same thing. The military pretty much breaks down except for a couple places. In the last ship, they break down except for a couple ships and a couple towns and things like that. So that seems pretty common.
But again, like I think they need that to happen because you don't have a prepper story if the government and the army is still there.
You don't have prepper stuff if the military is still there because they really will not. I mean, in a scarcity future, I don't see how anybody would have the freedom to have 20,000 rounds of ammunition and 4,000 cans of food when their neighbors are starving. I don't think a government would, just be okay with that.
Yeah, well, I think that actually happens in like that recent prepper movie. Like the local governor tries to come and take the supplies. I haven't seen it though, but I just think because they need the government and the military to not be there, they need that to not be a factor because otherwise this whole thing doesn't work. It's like so. Just imagine there's an EMP, but the government and the military just sort of just react and respond to it, and they're like, yeah, we got hit by an EMP. Like we're gonna have to sort of tighten our straps for a while, but we'll be okay. And the preppers are like, oh, okay. Like there's no trailer park people coming to take their stuff. There's no like gangs from south of the border coming to take your stuff. Like it's just like, oh, okay. And like then the prepper doesn't get to be the hero. They're just living a bit better than everyone else if they get to keep their stuff. So they need that breakdown.
To me, there's sort of an interesting issue there because, like, for example, I've lived for most of my career in either the South or the Midwest of the United States, where generally people have a very positive view of the military and certainly have a very positive view. And I'm not stereotyping people who live elsewhere, but I'm just saying, like in Texas, when you see most people, like the National Guard, they're your friends and neighbors. And like there's flooding or there's a fire, like, hey, yay, National Guard, you're coming here to help us. Like that's positive. That's a good thing, right? And there's not only is there trust, but like they literally are your neighbor who's in the National Guard. So I'm thinking of The Last of Us. In the first episode there, I was I just didn't buy it that like an hour into the zombie apocalypse or whatever it's called, National Guards people are shooting children, like that transition. I have a very good friend who does a podcast called The Conspiracy Skeptic. He's Carl Mamer. He's a Canadian. And he has this really good point about like a lot of conspiracies demand that people go from zero to Hitler in like 5 minutes, without any transitional period, right? So you're just a normal guy and then you're a death camp doctor, like with no transition, no like propaganda and like, whatever. I mean, and I think that is a problem there. I mean, I don't see the scenario where the National Guard instantly becomes like murdering kids just because they're ordered, even though they're ordered to, which I don't think they would be that quickly.
So have you seen the movie The Crazies? It's got Timothy Oliphant.
No.
It's about like okay. He's like a small town sheriff and there's like a virus that just gets released in the town. It's obviously come from America. And so like America's trying to like secretly like sweep it under the rug. And so they grab a bunch, like you don't see this, but like the military grabs a bunch of soldiers in the middle of the night, swaps out the uniforms and just sends them in saying like, just take everyone out. And so they capture one of these guys and then he's like, oh God, am I going to get sick? And they're like, what have you been told? He's like, I don't know, man. They grabbed us, took us here, told us to take everyone out. He's like, I didn't do it. Like, this is not what I became a soldier for. And he actually covers for them. Like he lets them get away because he's just like, this is nuts, man. Like I was in bed like 2 hours ago.
Yeah, I can believe, like, I don't know, we won't say which countries, but like super trained commandos by certain third world dictatorships, they're okay with that. Like, okay, you got to, well, okay, yeah, we got, yeah, at 4 o'clock, we wipe out everybody in this village. But I just have a hard time thinking like the average Australian soldier will go, yes, sir. I'll be back by dinner. No problem. There'd be no like, what time out? Hold on. I didn't sign up for this, mate. What?
Part of that might be like one, I think it's more to do with the government, not the soldiers. Because I think the people these books are aimed at, they do respect like soldiering, but they on the individual level, not the institution itself. I don't think they trust like bureaucracies. And as the army is like a tool of the bureaucracy, they don't trust that until they get to them on like an individual level.
But don't you have to have both? This goes to conspiracies. Like to say that like the United States never landed on the moon and there was a conspiracy of government. You can understand like yeah, governments do terrible things and governments, but you also have to believe that like tens of thousands of like computer engineer number seven said no problem, I'll go along with this. I'm good taking the secret to my grave, right?
Yeah.
And that now we know from history that like ordinary people can do terrible, evil things. That's certainly the case. But I don't feel like the transition is explained as well as Carol's transition.
So I think part of that might be that, again, I sort of have to like try and get into the mindset of like this prepper audience because like it sort of feels so different to my sort of expectations that like it feels a bit weird putting on that hat and sort of thinking about it. But I think maybe for them, they sort of see society as like this, I think it's like the blanket of civilization or something. It's like the second that's gone, people will revert back to being like the animals. And so it's like once society crumbles,
Lord of the Flies, right? Civilization is a thin veneer, and
yeah,
people will immediately go back to red in tooth and claw if given the slightest reason to.
yeah. I think that might be sort of how they're viewing this. And so for them to have people go like that and sort of take that route, it sort of justifies and represents that sort of outcome, which is what they would want. Because again, like a lot of these stories just sort of seem to be like wish fulfillment. Or like just, this is your dream scenario.
So I guess I'm sure we probably need to wrap up, and I really appreciate having this conversation. In terms of warfare, it does seem like you got two choices. You can avoid warfare, like again, hide deep in the forest and hope nobody notices you. And yeah, you've got your guns, and probably the only people who are going to come by are individual stragglers and so on. The Bill scenario of the television show Last of Us, where he's got this all these fences and things like that, that seems really just asking for it.
They did something for him. They actually in the game, I think he just survived there, but in the show, they had him hide, and the people that went on the truck are actually the people who went and got executed. And so they sort of added that extra layer of he was right to not trust the government.
Yeah, which again, that makes sense narratively. But what I mean is like, if I'm a lone prepper with my supply, I won't like build barbed wire fences and like call attention to myself, that I'm hiding here. Yeah, because somebody's just going to drive a truck through the fence and kill me, right? So
Yeah, but so in that instance, you've got humans and zombies, and the fence is going to take care of the zombies, but it's not going to take care of the people. So your best bet for just humans is to just hide and sort of keep like a low profile.
or you form an army or join the army. I mean, there's one or I mean, I don't know. Maybe you'd say Last of Us does this well. It's like you're either a small guerrilla faction or you're Fedra. Like there's nothing in between, right?
There does seem to be a fair few militant factions in that setting. like like even with the second game, you get the Washington Liberation Front, the Seraphites, the Rattlers in Los Angeles. Like it does sort of seem like people have built like really big groups and they're sort of fighting off against Fedra. Yeah, they don't seem to have done a good job on that show.
Well, anyway, I guess we're saying that in a lot of depictions of the apocalypse, you either want to be completely solo, but the end game of that, I don't want Bill's future. Let's put it that way, of just being alone with my cans of food. I don't think that's portrayed as like a positive outcome. Or you can join a group, but like, what would be the morality and the ethics and the constitution of the group? Are you going to be predators and parasites, or are you going to try to rebuild civilization?
That depends. Like, have you seen A Quiet Place?
Yes. I mean, I saw the first movie and the second movie. I actually did another show on talking about Quiet Place, but please go ahead.
Yeah, so I just randomly made a weird connection then. I haven't read it yet, but it's like the dark forest. It's sort of like everyone can sort of they know other people are out there, but they won't make a noise because it'll draw attention to themselves. So in the quiet place, at night they turn on lights, so you can see there are other survivors out there, but you don't go and talk to them because the noise is going to bring the alien things. So you do have like other people living within close proximity, but there's this unspoken, obviously, understanding that you don't go and talk to each other because otherwise the monsters are going to hear you. And so you've got like families living on their own, sort of like I think it's called like the porcupine theory or something, where it's like you don't get too close, but you're close enough. And anyway, yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I'm, there's a, I guess I'm spoiling it by saying it falls into this genre. Jack McDivitt, now passed away, was a great science fiction writer who wrote a lot of science fiction set in the future and so on. And he has a short story called Cryptic, which is a very, there's a whole sub genre of we get a message from space, we get the wow signal, right? And it's not just a signal, like, of course, it like in the movie Contact, like, oh, it's blueprints, to build a machine, which I wouldn't recommend, by the way. We do get blueprints. But in this short story, and I'm sorry I'm giving it away, but we're talking about something that's 30 years old. Uh, just in brief, a character finds that scientists had received an artificial signal that was 100% was an artificial signal from another civilization from a nearby star, but they figured out that it was encrypted in very deep encryption. And so what they inferred from that is somebody's having a war out. So that was it. We don't know what the signal said. We just know, whoever sent this is super paranoid. Why are they super paranoid? Right?
Oh, okay, okay. Interesting.
That's the dark forest, right? I mean, it's part of the dark forest. Is you better stay dark. We shouldn't be sending I Love Lucy into space. We should be like quiet. You know, I think some scientists said that. We should be more quiet than we are.
Yeah, we're about 100 years too late for that. No, there's another indie novel. I'm pretty sure it's called Carrier Wave. Anyway, signal comes in from outer space. Some like amateur astronomer, whatever, hears it, gets a recording, sells it to just this DJ who just likes weird sounds and like just remixes them and puts them into music. He puts this song that he makes from this sound out on like, the internet, and it gets like a bajillion hits overnight. And he realizes it's sending people crazy. And that's actually what brings the end of like an end to the world. Like he was the one who just ended it all. So he was like, oh, okay, that's my fault. Just jumps off a building.
Uh, we're going down some rabbit holes here, but there's an interesting variation of that in the new. I'm blanking now. I think this is the new Outer Limits that was done in like the 80s or the 90s. Because the Outer Limits was an old black and white show, but they did a new version, and there was exactly that. There was a signal from space, and it was physically making people sick. And the whole episode was them. Oh God, gosh, these aliens from space. They're trying to make, and especially children. If like young people, teenagers listened to it, they got very sick. But again, I'm giving away the ending. It turned out it was making them sick because there would be a terrible event, and only the people who had this sickness would survive this event. So the aliens were being helpful there. So I love that twist for.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
But anyway, ending on the topic of warfare, form an army, join an army, or go in the dark forest is our advice, right? Either one, pick one. There's not a third option.
Yeah, I'd probably just try and go underground. I'd find an island somewhere, a mountain valley, or I'd go underground or something.
I'd love to be in Tasmania. I think wouldn't Tasmania do pretty well? It's a large agricultural community. People know each other very well. It's sort of isolated.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
The thylacine werewolves would be a problem, but
That's an issue. Yeah. Yeah.
well, thank you very much for having me on. It's been a lot of fun. I get to talk about some geeky stuff. This in class. I love talking to. Yeah, I often joke that being a professor at a university is like the opposite of that Oscar Wilde story, The Picture of Dorian Gray, because you get older and fatter and balder, but everybody else stays 18. And so having now 35 years of 18-year-olds to discuss these things with, I'm always really interested at their perspective because, of course, generations change and different perspectives. And of course, different games and movies and TV shows and books come along.
I'm actually finding that myself because I did my bachelor's when I was like teens, 20s. But now that I'm in Germany, I'm doing my master's degree here. And I'm now the mature age student. And it used to annoy me that like the mature age student was always talking in class. But now I'm that person. I'm like, oh, I get it now. I actually want to have a discussion. Like, this is interesting. So I'm always torn between like, do I talk to the lecturer or do I not? But like, they'll often just come to me because I'm the only one talking. And I'm like, oh, God, you become what you hate.
In the post-apocalypse, that's probably true. We will become that which we hated. We'll see. So we agree. We'll meet up in Tasmania. We got to buy some property in Tasmania.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. That is the plan. Definitely. Yeah.
Or West Texas. I actually think West Texas would do pretty well. I like West Texas. We're 6 hours away from a major city. Like so.
Okay. That's ocean. Like, sadly, my only knowledge of like America of that region is like from Fallout, like New Vegas. Like that's about my knowledge of that area. Like Texas is sort of down the Gulf area.
The Gulf is maybe it's 6 hours drive or 5.5 hours drive from here to Dallas, and then it would be another. I don't know the hours, but I think it would take about 12 hours, not 10 hours of straight driving, 12 hours straight to get to ocean.
Okay.
We're in the west of the state, which is the high desert. We're 3,000 feet up, but very, very flat.
Oh, so it's like landlocked on the west side. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm way off.
Yeah. No, I mean, Texas, I know you've never heard this before, but Texas is big. It's like very, very big. And you have these wildly different ecosystems. Like, I mean, you can get like jungle. I mean, Australia, like people are always surprised that there's a part of Australia that's like rainforest, right? But like I mean, from a distance, we assume everything is Mad Max, just, bleak.
There is a lot of that. Yeah.
In the middle.
It's not even the middle. It's right to the edge. There's like a one mountain range and it's a desert. Oh, but yeah. Okay. I'll look into some Texan geography, find out what's what. But yeah, no, this has been great. Seriously, anytime you want to come on and have a chat about this stuff, I am down. This is how I got a job writing for a post-apocalyptic video game. I literally just reached out and said, hey, can I work for you guys? And they're like, yeah, sure. So I worked on a PA game set in Australia. Call out anytime if you've got some random idea you just want to hash out. I'm down for it anytime.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I guess we can say goodbye to the audience. Thank you.
Okay, no worries.
Audience.
Cool.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
And thus ends the first discussion of Apocalypse Apocrypha. Not bad. Hopefully next month we'll return to our usual schedule, but I don't know. Who knows? You heard the man. He wants to come back. I got no problem with that. Sounds good to me. But yes, I have finished the next book. I've read through it. It's pretty good. And we'll get to it when we get to it, I guess. So, we're at the end, and this is the part where I ask you to like, subscribe, share, sign up to my newsletter, all that good stuff. Apparently I have guests now. That's kind of cool. So yeah, until next time, take it easy.